Welcome everyone to another edition of Playthrough, and on this edition it's Hoshi No Kirby, which is known as Kirby's Dream Land in Japan. The original Kirby game, and the one that started it all, in one of my favorite franchises of all time. It's been a little bit since I played Kirby's Dream Land, and since I haven't covered the Japanese version of the original, I figured why not for a bonus play it through. So here we go with Hoshi No Kirby, aka Kirby's Dream Land for the Nintendo Gameboy. As we begin the game, we start off in level 1 known as Green Greens. There's a total of 5 levels in the game, with the 5th one working more like a boss rush with a few little small elements of the past levels, and then of course the final showdown with King Dedede. There isn't a ton of differences from what I've noticed between the Japanese and North American versions of the game. If you've never played the original Kirby, you may notice that you don't get the ability in this one to actually change your power. You can't absorb enemies and then get the cool powers like we start to see in the later Kirby games, starting with Kirby's Adventure on the NES, and then would go on to every game since then. The original Kirby was just more of a straight platformer where you had to suck in enemies, you could still eat them, and then mostly though turning them into stars and spitting them out in order to do damage to other enemies, break down obstacles, and of course take out bosses. And while that power ability isn't here, a lot of the classic enemies that have become a major staple and long-time running characters of the Kirby franchise, like King Dedede, Pronto Burt, Waddle Dee, Waddle Doo, Squishy, and so many other enemies end up making appearances in this game, and we're still seeing them in Kirby games. Though there are a few in here that we don't see all that often. You may notice a couple as we're going through that you just don't see quite as much in later Kirby games. Controls, of course, for Kirby are pretty simple, as you have the ability to jump, as well as suck in enemies, and then also the ability, by hitting up on the D-pad, to inflate yourself and actually fly over terrain and be able to get away from certain enemies. As we drop in here, we have the first boss of the game, of course, Wispywood, the iconic first boss who has been redone, changed up, and made a little bit meaner as games have gone on, but for the most part has remained relatively the same, of being the stagnant tree that drops apples, allows us to suck them in, and immediately blast them in the face with them until he starts crying and Kirby dances at the tears of the poor tree. Stage number 2 is Castle Lololo, which has us battling against Lololo and Lololo, which clearly are based on the Lolo and Lala characters from the Eggerland series of games, also known as the Adventures of Lolo series. Some of the best puzzle games ever to come out, especially on the NES. One interesting fact with Kirby is he actually wasn't originally named Kirby, and because of this, it went along with the naming scheme for things a little bit easier. For example, we have Lololo, Lalala, as well as King Dedede, with all of them having 3 parts, whereas Kirby was actually supposed to be known as Popopo. And because of that, of course, would go right along with the naming scheme, but for whatever reason, they decided to change his name up. There's also rumors that it was supposed to be actually named after a member of the Nintendo staff, and that's how Kirby got his name, though I'm not positive that that was ever confirmed or not. In the level, we're able to pick up the invincibility item and then just run through a large series of enemies before hitting the star and blasting off into the mini-boss version of Lololo. For both versions of the fight, you have Lololo, or Lalala in the second one, popping out of these little openings and then carrying a little block with them. The blocks are very similar to the ones they have in the Adventures of Lolo games, and your goal is of course to suck them in and spit them back out. Very simple to do, and it's cool that they use that as the mini-boss so you kind of get used to the way they work, because not too far after that you'll be battling them for real, both at the same time, and they have multiple entrances in the second battle against them. During the main fight, you have to battle both Lololo and Lalala at the same time, and have to be able to suck in the boxes and spit them out in order to do damage to either one. 3 hits to each, and they are taken out. You can focus on one at first, and then work on the other, and that seems to be what happens to me, but it's usually just pure luck if I end up taking out one before the other, just wherever they ended up spawning and wherever I ended up being, and I'm able to take them down and move on to stage number 3. Stage number 3 is Float Islands, which is another kind of staple of Kirby to have an island-themed level in it, with so many kind of sea-based creatures and enemies like Squishy and the like that we get to battle throughout. The most annoying enemy for me has always been pretty much the little coconuts or whatever they are that end up falling from the trees. They may just be a type of nut in general, but either way, they always seem to get in my way, and I always end up flying into them, or they land on my head as I'm trying to quickly go by, as I don't even notice that they're up in the tree, and end up running directly into them. Kirby has always been one of my favorite franchises in gaming. I find the games fun, but not overly challenging, and that's what I like about them overall. Though there are some cheap moments here and there, especially in Dreamland 2, a couple of moments with some scrolling areas and the like that can be a little bit cheap. But for the most part, they provide enough challenge, but more so it's about the fun factor of the Kirby games, and why I always find myself going to them on like a bad day. You know, having a bad day, need to cheer up, just want to kind of chill and relax, and I usually end up finding myself reaching for a Kirby game. Usually this one or Kirby's Adventure, which is my personal favorite of all the games. I know everyone loves Superstar, and it's an amazing game for what it was, but I think the nostalgia of this and Adventure will always win out, especially Adventure, as far as being my absolute favorite Kirby game, and probably nothing will ever top it. The Nightmare in Dreamland remake on the Game Boy Advance was actually well done, and I recently replayed that one and really enjoyed seeing the differences between Adventure that I played a lot more than Nightmare in Dreamland, and there were some cool little features and nuances changed up in that one to make it cool. We then get the third boss of the game, my favorite from this game, as it's more of a scrolling shooter style boss than anything else. Kabula, which has only appeared in this and the redone version of Kirby Superstar Ultra on the DS. She actually is supposed to be King Dedede's personal ship. And yes, it actually is a female ship that's attacking you here. During the fight, we move up and down, watching out and getting in between the 3-shot spread shot and watching out for her as she dashes across the screen, consistently firing out those fireballs in order to keep doing damage, and it doesn't take too long, though, for Kabula to be beaten. Speaking of, like, favorite bosses and all, Kraken is definitely one of my top ones. I don't think I have one top boss or one top enemy of Kirby or power or anything like that, as I love so many, and I actually would love to do some top 10 some point of my favorite Kirby enemies and bosses and the like. But Kraken is one of those ones that's been around since the original and has remained some of the tougher fights overall. In fact, I think arguably Kraken is the toughest regular boss in this title, though that's not really saying much as it's pretty lax difficulty-wise. Here we have like the first time we're seeing Sir Kibble as we deal with sucking him in as he tries to throw out his little boomerang like blades out at us. We also have to deal with a lot of Scarfies in this stage, the enemies that if you try to suck them in, they just get mad and run at you and explode, and they're a little bit hard to dodge sometimes as you try to get away because you don't want to deal with them. And also when you end up hitting them with either Kirby's like breath or sucking an enemy and using that, he still ends up exploding and can hit you from that residual explosion damage as you're battling him. Here we get to the mid-boss version of Kraken, like his non-evolved form with the, not the full cloud version of him, just the small little rotating stuff around him, though very similar in some regards to the final version that we'll get the battle in just a bit. He will drop Waddle Doos that we'll be able to pick up and then fire at him in order to do damage, as well as he kind of does a wave-like figure 8 pattern across the screen that is pretty easy to get around. Once he's taken care of, though, we jump into the star and blast off into the sky, into like the space-like setting, which is a really nice looking. Even on the Game Boy, like just the simple black and whiteness of the entire screen looks really cool with the whole space theme. A little bit of health is located in the center there if you want to grab that. And then we're going to head over here, watching out for a couple of Waddle Dees, as well as you could get a maximum tomato over there if you want to grab that one as well. On the next screen, we end up getting the super spicy curry that we get to then blast out fireball-like power-up at all these blocks as we slowly move through. There is some falling stars that we do have to watch out for as we're doing it, but still pretty cool to get that spicy curry ability. On the next screen is this one where we get to go straight up, watching out for a bunch of parasoling Waddle Dees, Waddle Doos, and a few Surf Kibbles. And this scene was actually completely recreated in Kirby's Adventure in one of my favorite levels. The last level of Kirby's Adventure before the final boss encounters is actually a throwback to this game that includes like pieces of all the levels from Kirby's Dream Land. It was like a throwback to something that wasn't even that old, but it's still one of the coolest stages in Kirby's Adventure. And that end part of that stage is actually just like that last ascending part. Now as we're battling Kraken, his main thing is he's just going to move back and forth left and right, but we have to jump over each time. He'll sometimes end up firing out a Waddle Doo that will be able to suck up and then launch at him. And then his main thing is the beams that just kind of go around him in a clockwise pattern. They don't last too long, and as long as you're a little bit away from him, you'll have no problem being able to dodge out of the way and get ready to attack him with whatever next Waddle Doo you end up picking up. The final level of the game is, of course, Mount DDD, and we get to see the awesome intro as Kirby rides on the star into the castle all the way in the background. Such a cool little scene, and then, of course, the ending that goes along with it is really awesome as well. As we get out of the star and Kirby comes to a screeching, crashing halt, we come to the main center here, where we have 4 doors featuring the bosses from the previous levels, as well as, of course, DD in the center. Each of these sections, you have to go through a small part of the level that they're based off of, but you have to be very careful as there's a spiky Gordo at the end of each, and you have to make sure that you hit the Kirby doll or doppelganger, and that'll get rid of the enemies on screen, including the Gordo, that will instantly kill you if you run into it, so you have to be really careful about that. You do have to rematch each of the 4 bosses in the game. Starting off, of course, we're going to do Wispy Wood, and it's the same fights with each of them. You're just trying, of course, to do them all in succession while also doing the little parts of the stage, but we just easily watch out for his blast out of his mouth, pick up the apples, and take care of Wispy Wood. Sorry, Wispy, made you cry again. Now in the lower left corner, we're going to head to Lololo and Lololo's part, the killer mask or whatever those things are that kind of attack me at the very top there, and then dash my way over to the right and hit the Kirby doll going into the battle here. Just like before, the hardest thing is actually getting the boxes and turning around fast enough to fire if you're trying to attack straight up. If you pick up one of the boxes, you actually can still hit down to go through the little openings without sucking down and eating the box. So if you want to make sure that you don't end up eating it, you can hit down. As long as you only hit like once, I think you should be able to get through those little openings and sneak up behind Lololo and Lololo and hit them that way. Now, instead of doing the other level, I'm going to go here first and battle Kraken again, falling all the way down to the very bottom, hitting the Kirby, and then battling good old Kraken, which, once again, he'll be moving back and forth left and right, dropping those Waddle Doos. Sometimes he'll just stand still for a little bit and do that rotating beams. As long as you're pretty much away from him, should have no problem being able to easily keep out of the distance of and be able to then turn around and do enough damage to him. The Kraken fight can also be pretty much the longest one in the game other than DDD, because DDD has a lot of health when you're battling him. But still a pretty easy kind of thing, and just kind of relax for some of it. Just can't be too lax, because then all of a sudden Kraken will dash across the screen and try to take you out. Once you deliver the final hit, though, we're going to head up into the upper right corner and go to Kabula for the second time. The second part here, we go over to the right and we have to drop on down, watching out for a couple of enemies, get in between a bunch of these spikes, being careful of the Gordo like always, and hitting the Kirby on the left side. And then we go back to this screen where we get to just walk over to the right and pick up the items so that we'll be able to battle Kabula by firing out all these projectiles. Like I said, this is my favorite fight probably in this game just because of the scrolling style shooter section that it is. There's not enough of these kinds of bosses in Kirby. In fact, there's only a couple that I can think of, like this one, and I know, of course, Nightmare in Kirby's Adventure, and then of course Nightmare in Dreamland is one in particular that's similar to that. Now it's onwards to, of course, King DDD, the always amazing King DDD. You of course have to watch out for him when he gets close, as he can do kind of the face plant and slide into you. He can of course also do the suck-in maneuver and try to pull in Kirby and then spin him out. And then of course the more important moves that he'll be able to do to us is the big jump, where he lands. He'll cause stars to come out of both the left and right side of him, one of which we'll be able to pick up and then spray at him in order to do damage. And the other time is of course his hammer that he will bring out, chase you down, and when it gets close, he'll slam that hammer down into the ground, causing another star to appear, which will then be able to suck in and blast back at him in order to do damage. As you can see, though, he has a pretty good amount of health, and this is, of course, a pretty challenging fight overall for this game, at least. And, of course, King Dedede has an awesome theme and final boss music, and all the music in Kirby is usually pretty catchy and great, and some of my favorite game music ever. As DDD will charge me one last time with the hammer, and I'll finish him off. I get to sit back and enjoy the ending to Hoshi No Kirby. So there you have it, Hoshi No Kirby, aka Kirby's Dream Land, the game that started it all as far as the Kirby franchise was concerned. I love this game, I love Kirby, just everything about him. He's fun, but he also can be pretty tough as far as, like, you know, a mean character sometimes. I love the differences between the North American and Japanese box arts, where they make him all, like, cute and cuddly in Japan, but then on the North American box arts, they usually make him, like, all mean with, like, a frown or angry face on to try to make it seem more intimidating, and for more people to be interested in potentially picking it up, because the North American audience is, of course, very different from the Japanese one. I also very much appreciate that HAL has kept making Kirby games throughout the years. There's usually a Kirby game every year for the last while now, some kind of even a spin-off or a main title. There's always new Kirby games, and I hope that continues for the foreseeable future. I hope they continue to do well, that they can keep making the games, because they're usually always fun. Even the ones that are really easy, like Epic Yarn, was still a great-looking game that had some really cool elements to it and some creativity, and just Kirby in general is amazing, and I hope we see tons and tons more Kirby games down the road. After beating the main game, you then get the ability, if you want to hold down the buttons and go into hard mode, but for this run, though, it's over, as we're going to wrap up this episode of Play It Through. I'd like to thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.